Hey, welcome to Scratching the Surface. I'm Jarrett Fuller, and this is my podcast about design criticism and practice. On this week's episode, I am talking with the designer and artist Daniel Eatock. Daniel studied design at Ravensbourne College and earned his MA from the Royal College of Art. He's worked with the Walker Arts Center, Channel 4, and co-founded the online portfolio builder Indexhibit. In 2008, Princeton Architectural Press published a monograph of his work called Imprint, and this is when I first discovered Daniel. I have a very vivid memory of this book coming out when I was in college 10 years ago now, and being just completely confused and fascinated by its contents and by Daniel's work. When Daniel was in college, he discovered conceptual art, and his practice has expanded beyond traditional graphic design to include a variety of conceptual works and practices that range from graphics to installations to books to drawings. And I remember being in college just being very fascinated by this and seeing nothing like it, and I've been a fan ever since. So in this conversation, I asked Daniel about that and how he thinks about his own practice. We talk about how he started in graphic design and how discovering Lucy Lepard's book, 6 Years, really changed his life and changed his work. We talk about his resistance to labels and labeling his work and how he incorporates his art into every aspect of his life. His work is just so fascinating to me, and I found this conversation just completely interesting and fun. Remember, if you're a fan of the podcast and want to help support it, you can become a member for $5 a month or $50 a year to receive an exclusive monthly newsletter with additional content and episode previews. These memberships really help keep the podcast going. I just appreciate all of your support and hope you enjoy this conversation with Daniel Eatock. I want to go all the way back, if we can, just to start and set this up. Did you study graphic design in school? Is that kind of like your early interest?
You know, I've been listening since you sent me the email. I think I've probably listened to a dozen of your podcasts. So I was scrolling through your list and of course I listened to all the people who I knew. So you've interviewed a lot of my friends, and it was really nice because some of those friends I haven't spoken to for 12 months or sometimes even longer. So when I listened to the podcast, it was a way of me catching up with them, but very one-sided. So I feel so I know what they're up to, but they have no idea what I'm up to. So it's been there's been an imbalance.
Well, hopefully they'll listen to yours then, so the conversation can keep going. Yeah.
But there was lots of, I kind of heard very similar beginnings, lots of people describing that they were children. I think yourself, what you described seeing typography in supermarkets. And so it's got me thinking. So I tried to come a bit prepared, thinking, how did I really get into graphic design?
I love that.
And I still don't know. I have no idea. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever been interested in graphic design.
I had a thought about that, but keep going.
Well, maybe you can kind of enlighten me, kind of why I'm in graphic design. Because I kind of... I think as a child, I was really persistent. I didn't like to be taught. I wanted to discover how to do things myself.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of traits which I recognize now, looking back, that are still part of my, I guess, way of being or personality. And a lot of people told me when I was a child that I was really good at drawing. But deep down, I knew that I wasn't, but I could fake it. I could make a drawing that they would think was good, but really, technically, it's not very good. I had friends at the same age that could draw way better, so I could kind of see that I'm actually not very good at drawing. And I was never really good at writing because I'm dyslexic, so I always struggled with language. I'm also not very good at maths. And I wasn't interested in sport, so I kind of. But I had friends in all these different areas. So I was friends with kind of the clever kids at school. Right. This is probably like the age of, say, between like 11 and 15. This period. So I had friends that were the rough kids, the ones from the poor families, the clever kids, and the rebel kids, the ones that kind of conformed. I kind of had like a big connection with lots of different types of people. And I don't know what this has got to do with graphic design, but I think it's still connected with my practice. I mean, I think I'm interested in the world, not so much in graphic design. And graphic design has given me a set of tools or processes or ways of organizing and seeing things that enable me to live in the world in a productive way. So it means that I can organize things so I don't need to remember things. I can research things so I don't need to, again, remember things or log data. I can kind of access it when I need it. I'm good at I'm not really good at photography, but I'm very good at selecting the picture that is the best from the 100 that I might have taken. So all these skills are somehow part of graphic design. So graphic design just prepared me with a toolkit that I can lead an interesting life.
This is interesting because I feel the same. I feel similar to what you're talking about in that, to me, graphic design has become just like almost exactly what you just said, is a way to kind of see the world, or a way to understand or make sense of everything else. And as a high school student, and even now, graphic design was a way that introduced me to all of these other things, whether it was certain writers, whether it was certain films, whether it was certain music. But the reason I'm kind of saying this is I'm curious how you found that graphic design was that thing for you. Like, where did that term, or this idea of this is a thing you could do, where'd that come into your life?
Well, my dad was a designer.
Oh, okay.
And my mum was a typographer.
Oh, all right. There we go.
So I guess it was on my radar from being a child.
Yeah.
And I never rebelled as a child. I never thought that because it was in the house, that kind of way of being, that when I left high school, I just went to college to study design, graphic design. And never even thought about I could do something else. It's just, this is what we do. This is what people do.
How early was it that you started kind of feeling like you were pushing up against the limits of graphic design? I mean, one of the first things you said is that you're not sure you were ever interested in it. How soon did you kind of come to that realization?
I think I entered it. You can do lots of courses, or you can read a book about how to, like, if you read a cookery book, you don't think you're going to be a chef. You just read it because it kind of gives you new information, new ingredients, new combinations, or techniques of things which would take a long time to discover on your own. So I think when I was studying graphic design, it was the same. It's almost like I could appreciate the tools and the methods, and thinking, oh, this would be great to apply in a different context. I never thought, great, now I know how to do a book, or now I know how to design this thing. Right. So, yeah, I felt like part of me was in the right place because I was being given life skills.
Yeah.
And when you're at college anyway, all the projects are, I think from my experience, a lot of the projects were, I don't like the word self-initiated, but I wasn't really responding to very many briefs. Most of the time, I was using the skills that were being taught, but then applying them to my observations, and then the two things fit really well together. And then I would have lots of outcomes. And I could present them in crits. And because I was really nervous in presenting, I found I would try to be as objective and clear as possible and concise. I didn't need to, there was no poetry. I could kind of explain 1 + 1 = 2, and that's the answer.
Right.
Or I could say, half of 8 is 3, and everyone will be, what do you mean it's 3? So, well, if you take a number 8 and if you cut it vertically in half, the shape that is left appears like a number 3, so it's 3. So I would start to discover these kind of paradox or conundrums, and then that became part of this logic. So I was really like almost like a scientist trying to break a creative problem down to like some kind of scientific conclusion. Yeah. But with this kind of I don't know, like I would try to break that logic with a bit of irony or wit or something to challenge it, and then there'll be this kind of outcome that was part rational, part bonkers, and then that's my work.
Well, I mean, while you're in school, I'm kind of hearing you say this, thinking about my own undergraduate education, where our projects were something like, design a logo, like make up a company and design a logo for it, or here's a bunch of content, design a book for it, or design a magazine. Were those kind of the assignment? Like, how did you? I guess the question I'm asking is like, how did you kind of pair these kind of experiments you were doing within the constraints of a design program? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean, but I've got such a bad memory that I find it easier to talk about work I've made recently than going back to being a student. There are still student projects that the funny thing is, I don't know if I remember making them. I just remember, because I've talked about old work so often in lectures that I don't know whether I'm remembering my own stories rather than the reality.
Yeah.
So, but I know that I made works, I think in my degree.
Okay.
So I did a 2-year. It was called a BTEC. So that's from being 16 up until 18. Okay. And then at 18, I did a degree at Ravensbourne College.
Right.
And my degree was, in a way, that's my proper education. So that's leaving home, moving to, it wasn't London, just outside of London, but it felt that's where my education started. And like the assignments in the first year were very basic, like really just basic typography, or even before typography, it was moving like centimeter squares around a grid to make asymmetric compositions.
Right, yeah, I remember those.
And I loved it. And I think it was only in the third year that I started to, once I had the understanding of making hierarchies and asymmetric compositions and basic typography, that I started to then add like a conceptual layer.
Yeah.
And then I went to the RCA, and I was at the RCA for 2 years, and really that's when everything kind of fell in place. So I was able to, I had the skills to compose things graphically, but then I had the conceptual understanding to apply those skills to things, to observations. And I made lots of work that appeared like graphic design. Like I started to make posters and greeting cards and books. But my motivation I wasn't taking, they weren't commissioned in a typical sense where there's a client saying, can you make this? And here is the content. I would build something from scratch as a response to the world, and use my design skills as the glue that kind of bound everything together.
This is a theory that I have that I kind of want to run by you. Just based on what you're saying, it's reminding me of something else that I've been thinking about lately that I think your work fits nicely in. And I've been thinking about self-initiated graphic design projects and how boring a lot of them are. They're either projects that are, and I'm guilty of this also, they're either about the designer, they're kind of very personal or biographical, or they're projects that are about design. And there's not a lot of conceptual interest there. And it just feels like a client project that was done for the designer themselves. And your work is not like that. And your work is very, it's very idea driven first before it takes on a formal quality. It seems very rooted in these ideas. And I watched the Walker Art Center talk that you gave, which I guess, I think that was 2009. So it's almost 10 years ago. So I apologize for quoting something that you said 10 years ago. But you in that talk, you talked about discovering conceptual art and conceptual artists while you were in school. And you had this phrase where you wanted to see if you could dematerialize design. And I found that so profound and kind of exactly about this thing that I've been wrestling with about the almost superficial or lack of conceptual ideas in self-initiated projects. And so I don't know if I have a question there, other than I would love to hear you kind of talk about that a little bit more, and if that kind of resonates with you at all.
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of areas there to kind of So yeah, this word dematerialization. So that came from Lucy Lippard's book, Six
Okay.
Years: The Dematerialization of the Art Object,
Oh, okay.
and that was when I was doing my degree. I found that book in the first year, and I think I had it on permanent loan for the
Right.
whole college. It wasn't a book that was then in print. It is now, I think. Um, but I didn't realize as a kid that all my creativity, regardless of what the outcome was really rooted in language, not in visual.
Mm-hmm.
So when I used to go to museums with my mum and dad, like if we'd travel a bit, we came to New York when I was a kid. I went to MoMA, I went to the
Yeah.
Guggenheim, and I'd be seeing all these kind of iconic works. And I always felt on the outside, I couldn't fall into a painting. I couldn't stand in front of a painting and be struck by it and love it.
Mm,
I always thought, well, it's just color and texture and form, and it looks okay, but it's so subjective. It might.
yeah.
I wasn't using those words, but I couldn't. That's all it was. And then when I started to recognize that art had a conceptual side, and that conceptual art was almost purely language based, it wasn't about
Yeah.
it's the material side.
Right.
Then I fell into it. I totally, like, I loved it. I was rereading this book. I was kind of finding these conundrums of works that were described just so beautiful, and then it made me realize that actually my process is the same. So I'm resolving problems that very often are material or visual
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I'm studying graphic design, but the way that I'm arriving at those decisions is language based. And that's why I thought it'd be interesting to chat with you, because you talk so much about critical writing and writing as part of your practice.
Yeah.
I don't write as a writer. I don't make text to be read,
Right.
but writing, it's not really writing, but I guess words or language is a big part of what I do. It's just that the results is not a text or an essay. It can be anything. It can be a sculpture. It can be a drawing. It
Yeah.
can be an installation. It comes out in different ways, but I think the process is I'm guessing quite similar, just because it's language based.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on exactly kind of why I wanted to talk to you too, is that I've sensed in your work a certain interest in language, and a certain the work is so rooted in these ideas, but it comes out not as a text, it comes out as objects. And I'm curious, and I don't mean to be so reductive, but could you talk a little bit about that process of playing with these ideas? How do you start to connect ideas to forms or to materials when
I
it's
think,
something that's kind of language based like that?
yeah, I don't. They just are connected. So it's like
Yeah.
I have no choice. But so like an example. So if I don't make it, it'll just stay in my head. So then it doesn't exist.
Oh,
It
interesting.
exists in my head. So I have to put it out, and there's usually only one way, one form that can express that
Mm-hmm.
that idea or that thought. So it's what's an example that I can use quickly? So, do you know, I just sent you that picture of the toilet roll.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm interested in kind of turning things. Quite often, my work conceptually turns things inside out,
Right.
or turns something upside down. So a toilet roll is the center of the tube on the inside of a toilet roll. The paper is always wound around the outside.
Right.
And of course it is, because when you need toilet paper, it unravels. So then I thought, well, if it's the opposite of that would be to have the paper on the inside. And this connects with a joke. There's an American comedian called Stephen Wright,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm fascinated by a lot of his work as a comic. But like, he talked about, why do you put the wrapper on a straw on the outside, sorry, when it's the inside you want to keep clean. I fucked the joke up, sorry.
Right. I know what you mean. Yeah.
So this is the same. It's kind of like it's an impossible object. The paper's now cold on the inside, but it becomes like a poem or like a poetic object.
Mm-hmm,
Like, it's totally useless, but when you hold it and see it, it's very familiar.
Did you try to, when you kind of discovered conceptual art and discovered this process and kind of connecting that to the own way you were working. I'm curious how much you tried to do that in a graphic design context. Like, did you have any sort of obligation or responsibility or feeling that because you were studying design, you had to embed these ideas in design work? Or how did that kind of moving away from design into something that's more art-based come about?
Quite early on, when I left college, even during college, I decided to only use like A size paper, so like A4, A5, or bigger. And if I designed a book, it would be on an A format. It was a way of kind of reducing the format of things to like a guide. I was also only using one typeface.
Okay.
Accidents Grotesque. I use that for everything, and I always use the same weight, which was medium. So I like extremes, like everything or nothing, but I also like the halfway points.
Okay.
So it's kind of like the pivot of the two extremes.
Right.
So the medium made sense. So everything was in this, and then if the job had to be in color, then I would always get the client or a friend or somebody to choose the color.
Okay.
I would never make that decision. So I had these kind of rules that would help me produce things, just so I wasn't too indecisive. And those rules were never really made public. They were just my own ways of being able to commit to a process that would result with an outcome. Otherwise, I think I would have, because color's so subjective, I would be, let's make it red. I don't like red. Okay, we can be blue, pink, orange. It could be anything. And I didn't want to kind of waste time figuring that out.
I mean, I guess my question is, and you started to answer it, I guess I'm curious kind of when I discovered your work, you were already much more, I don't mean to put this kind of false division between design and art, but you were much more doing self-initiated kind of conceptual art projects. And I was curious about, before that, how you were able to kind of take some of these ideas and inject them into a design process when you had a client. And so you would make these rules to...
Well, that's about the process, I guess. But see, I don't see, looking back now, I don't think the work I made for clients and the work I made for the world outside of a commission, I don't like the word self-initiated, but whichever type of work, for me, it's all one and the same thing. So I still think that the work I made for clients was a contribution, in the same way, and it was an artistic contribution. It did what they required it to do, but there was also lots of other things in it that kind of, for me, then changed it. So I was never just delivering their message in the most succinct, digestible way. It might appear like that, but there'd be other things. I had other logics behind that surface. Because I was making a lot of I did a lot of work for Channel 4 in like 2000, between probably 2001 2005. So work on billboards and work that appeared on television. And even though the formats or the mediums that were displaying this work were quite public, the works, they still felt like the type of thing that I would have, made a small edition of. Like, it was the same type of work.
Right. Yeah, and I didn't mean for that question to sound like it was prioritizing one over the other, but I was kind of interested in those different contexts of when you're working with someone else, or it's a collaboration, or it's a client, versus when it's a art project or a project yourself, and you almost don't see those as different. The process itself, and even the output in some cases, could be very similar.
Yeah, but I guess now even the difference is even less, because I'm finding that I've got this design education, I've got this body of work that I've made. I'm still making work, but everything I make is special. So whether it's making a lot of bread, or making kombucha, or even going for a run, or making, like, I'm fascinated in being, I guess, in like DIY or
Mhm.
understanding, like learning new things or approaching things like I
Right.
don't know what I'm doing, like from as an amateur. And so life is just rich in all those areas,
Right.
and I yeah, everything feeds into each other, and it's all inseparable. It's like one big murky soup of stuff.
So what is your work now? Like what how do you spend your day? What is that kind of output like these days?
Um, like a typical day, do you know, I've recently, in the last 6 months, I've been running a lot. I love running, and so that's a big part of my, like, I've managed to get into a real rhythm of just enjoy, like, the pleasure of running, and it's really enjoyable. And I'm interested in nutrition and diet,
Mm,
and I like cooking and food, but on kind of old techniques. So, like, interested in like soaking of grains and kombucha and sourdoughs and making pickles, kind of like this traditional way of
right.
understanding and combining of foods, and also being aware of the moment and being present, like being really focused on the activity that I'm doing. So
Hmm.
rather than doing an action, thinking of the future or reminiscing of the past, I try to be really present in that thing that I'm doing.
Right.
I'm still learning how to be a better dad, learning how to spend time with my daughter and enjoy that time with her.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm trying to, I guess I'm trying to, my work I feel is going through a transition because what I'm recognizing now is that I feel that a lot of my work comes from, I don't know, like a place of anger, or
Oh,
I,
interesting.
th- I think my work is quite aggressive. It doesn't seem it on the outside, but I think the humor, like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of irony, and there's a lot of I don't know, there's a certain, there's something in it that I can that I'm saying to myself when I make it, that's it's made almost like in retaliation or to antagonize or to, and
Huh.
I know that the work is it doesn't seem like that.
No, it doesn't
So
at all.
so I'm wondering if it's possible to make work from a different place. So I'd like to make work that's, because, for example, what I've noticed is that irony and children don't mix very well. Like, I don't like to be sarcastic or ironic
Mm.
as a
Hmm.
dad.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking, like, the way, if you're sincere and in the moment and, I don't know, open to all possibilities, then good things happen. And I'm trying to make work with that frame of mind.
That's so interesting. I mean, I never would have thought about your work as angry or aggressive. It's definitely ironic. It's definitely humorous. I think there's a certain calmness to a lot of it, especially the kind of series on balancing, where you kind of you have the shelves where the objects are balancing the
Yeah,
shelves, or even the desk where they're balanced, or even the
yeah,
bookshelf that kind of sags in the middle. Um, there is a certain unease about those, but they're
yeah.
strangely calming. They're quiet almost. I'm curious what, to approach work from that other side, from a side of sincerity. How does that change the output, or is that something you're still kind of working through right now?
Yeah, I'm kind of I don't know. I don't have the answer,
That's
but
so
the work,
interesting.
hopefully just gradually, because I don't think there won't be a on off moment in the work. I think it will be like a gradual,
Right.
but I think that tension hopefully will start to change. So I think the work will, I don't know.
I have like 50 things going through my mind now, thinking about your work and kind of what you just said. Um, I'm I apologize if this is a again another kind of reductive question, but I'm thinking about all of this. I'm thinking about the context of kind of where your work is seen. Do you think about audience or viewer kind of in that process, or how someone kind of encountering your work, what they take away from it?
Yeah, a lot of it I leave to chance. So
Mm.
I've always kind of maintained like the idea of an open studio, and I don't leave my door open, but I feel like I try to share things on my website. I've done that for a long
Yeah.
time, and it's and I invite contributions or comments or um, like I'm interested in not in collaboration but in participation. So if people see
Mm.
things, they can contribute to it
Hmm. Hmm.
or participate in building of something. But I don't think of the audience so much. I just feel that if you make something that yourself connect with,
Yeah.
then surely you're not be the only one in the whole world that connects with this thing. Surely
Right.
somebody,
Right.
and it only needs to find one other person, and then it's worked. There's a conversation.
Right.
So if it's a conversation with yourself, then it's almost like it's that thing: if a tree falls in a forest and there's no one there, does it make a sound?
Right.
The minute there's another person, then everything makes sense. That then is a conversation. So I only need an audience of one, and then I'm happy.
Right.
And if that one person tells somebody or it gets passed on, that's even nicer, because then it becomes more economical. Like the cost or the time involved in making something, the more people see it, somehow the more value
Yeah.
it has, and it's just yeah.
I mean, this is probably something that's very obvious, but I kind of just made the connection to earlier when you were talking about kind of taking these ideas and turning them into objects or into material as a way to almost get them out of your head. That's almost that kind of first step in that conversation, that it's almost the objects themselves, or the work itself is the way to start the conversation. Otherwise they are just, these ideas that you're
Yeah.
just kind of playing with yourself.
Yeah.
It's a way to invite somebody else in to the conversation, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. And then I found by publishing things on my website, then then for example, this podcast, this is a way of sharing ideas. So this is a way of talking about things, but it's
Right.
also becomes its own thing, also, doesn't it? And
Right.
like I can describe works in this podcast. So if a listener hears the things we describe, then they don't necessarily need to see it because the description is enough.
Right.
And then I use the work sometimes with students if I'm teaching as examples of things.
Mm-hmm.
I would like, sometimes I make shows in galleries or museums. I'd like to do that more often. And then I make books. So I have like a myriad of different ways of sharing things. And some works are more appropriate for one medium than another. But it's so I just kind of put things into the world the most economical and easy way possible.
You mentioned teaching. How much is teaching a part of your work, or how much teaching do you do?
Right now, I've not taught for probably 2 years,
Okay.
but I still feel like a teacher. So if I'll get emailed by students that are writing something or researching, and I'll kind of engage with them. I think teaching will always be a part of my practice, but there'll be perhaps long periods where I don't do any.
Right.
I don't literally go into a university. But it's a lot of fun. Like the most fun I had teaching, I think, was at UAV in Venice. So
Okay.
and it was so the invitation was just great. It's like there was a mixed class of MA students from photography, fine art, and design, and architecture.
Interesting.
So like four different disciplines, and I had them for 3 months, and I could do anything I wanted, and I wasn't accountable for anything. So I just got given a big studio and this group of students, and it was brilliant. It was like a dream come true, just having these conversations with a mixed, diverse group of people, and then exploring things. And that was like the ultimate teaching experience. And I'd like to do that type of thing more often. But
yeah, I mean, that reminds me. I was going to ask if you were kind of teaching in design departments or kind of what type of students you were working with. But what you just described reminded me of Robert Irwin. In that book about him, seeing is forgetting the name of the thing one sees. Do you know this book?
No.
Where Robert Irwin basically did something similar, where he was kind of teaching conceptual art and working with artists and stuff, and basically he had this idea called being available in response, where he would just go to a school or go to a group of people, basically with nothing prepared, and just see what was on their minds and what they needed. And this idea of just being available to them, and then the discussions and the work that kind of came out of that. And it sounds like exactly what your experience was like.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah. But I just thinking of myself as a student, that would be a wonderful teacher to have had, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
probably quite scary also, but yeah, what a great.
Yeah. I mean, I've started teaching more and more, and it's become more and more central to my work, I think, is being in the classroom. And I've done some experiments in kind of dialing up and down my level of control over the class. And when I step back and let the students kind of lead the class, they always get to much more interesting ideas than than if I'm standing up front directing the class.
Yeah. I guess this idea of like relinquishing control is really, it's a fun thing, isn't it? It's scary, but I like that, the unknown. So if kind of not completing something, so either the viewer or the user has to add to it in some way. Teaching, where if you begin, it's like this now, like our conversation, we don't know where we're going to end, and that's the fun thing of a conversation or a discussion.
Right.
Whereas if you came with the same questions, and it was like, I think like one answer leads to the next question that then leads to the next. So it's kind of fluid, and I think teaching, I feel, kind of is best when it's kind of conversational like that.
Yeah, totally. Did you? Yeah. So were you teaching when you were kind of teaching in school settings? Were you teaching mostly in design departments, or what kind of students did you have?
Yeah, mainly design. So yeah, mainly within graphic design.
And what?
But I did always. It's funny because when I was teaching in the design department, often the people that would invite me would see me as an artist. So it's like knowing that I have a design background, and the same with the students. The students thought he's being taught by someone who's not a designer. It'll be interesting.
Right.
And then the times when I have taught in art departments, they see me as a designer.
Right. Of course.
So now I really like this. Wherever I am, I'm always the opposite.
Yeah.
And it's quite a nice position to take. So I'll kind of happily accept that position. I'm the black sheep in that environment,
right.
And therefore, I don't know. You get a different. I don't know. It feels less restrictive.
I didn't even think the reason I asked that is because I was going to ask, as somebody who's had a very non-traditional design career, if we want to call it that, what it's like for you to be in the classroom with designers, how much of that comes in. So it's interesting that they see you as an artist. I didn't think about the other side of artists seeing you as a designer. And the reason I'm asking this is something I've been thinking about a lot is I came up in a design education system that was very traditional. It was very rooted in the Bauhaus. Modernism was good design. Everything that was not modernism was bad design. It was rule-based. You go and you work for a company where you have clients. And I feel like so much of my career post-graduation has been trying to fight against that or find other ways to use these skills, these design skills, in other contexts. And now as a teacher, I'm trying to find the balance of that in the classroom of how much is it my job, or how much can I kind of show these students that design traditionally is one thing, but it can also be all of these other things. Is that something that you've thought about, or is that something that comes up when you're teaching, or even in your own work, I guess?
Yeah, I'm going to try to answer your question, but in a
that's fine
indirect way.
Okay, perfect.
So if you apply like your modernist Bauhaus style graphic design education to cooking, or to diet, or to the way you organize your living space, then I think it's really appropriate. Like there's a sense, There's
Yeah.
that process with food is really great. That's modernist, a modernist graphic design education and cooking are really compatible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Whereas no, if you because there's nothing if you go to a restaurant and you order some food and when it comes on the plate, if it feels that someone's embellished those ingredients and kind of overworked them and balanced things and it looks too fiddly and it's like whereas if you're truthful to a process and to ingredients and just let whatever happens, you work with good produce from a good source provider and you know the things are good. You don't need to do too much to them.
Right.
The flavors are there and it's just great. You don't need to try too hard. And for me, that's kind of so. I'm not sure how it goes back to your question, but so in my own practice, I feel that my education it sounds very similar. And I think I draw upon those things every day in almost everything I do. But the outcome doesn't appear at all like modernist graphic design. The process is the same, but the conclusion is different. And the only reason it's different is because I'm not making posters or book covers. And the way that we see modernist design is like the poster that's in the background from the Helvetica film.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But if you break that poster down and understand kind of the way it was made, not the aesthetic of the poster, but the process and the ideology behind it. And if you applied that to appearance, your appearance embodies that same philosophy of that poster. Do you know what I mean? You've got a white T-shirt.
Yeah.
You feel the same as you're a Helvetica person.
Right.
In appearance.
Is that a compliment?
It's not a compliment or a criticism. It's more like an observation.
Yeah.
It's not good or bad.
I know what you mean. The reason I'm asking is in the interviews that I've read that you had done before, in the talks that I had watched and rewatched to prepare for this, I sense that you make a conscious effort that design isn't necessarily the thing that you do anymore. Or that maybe that kind of definition of design doesn't work for you anymore. Would you agree with that before I keep going so I don't do another one?
It changes every day. So
okay.
Maybe I don't remember the last time that I said that in a lecture, but I think today I wouldn't be so dogmatic. I'm kind of whatever the viewers or the audience's observation.
Right.
That's I'm happy to it. That's fine. If they see me as a designer, I feel comfortable with that. I did study design, so that's okay.
Okay. I mean, this is interesting then because it kind of gets to what I've been thinking about. And another thing I wanted to talk to you about is as I see my own career moving in these different directions, I feel like I have a certain... I don't want to let go of that design word, even though my work is moving more and more outside of traditional graphic design. There's still something about that idea of being a graphic designer that feels right to me. And so my question, which now might not make sense, was kind of your relationship to that word or to that term as a graphic designer, and how that it kind of takes us back to the beginning of the conversation, how that relates to the work you're doing now.
Do you know, I don't have a title because if I think of myself as an artist, I also find that a bit cringy. To call yourself an artist or to call yourself a designer or I don't really identify. I'm just a person. I'm a person with lots of different interests.
Yeah.
And I try to. I think I was going to say I work hard to try to do the best I can, but then effort is not. Sometimes by working hard, you can overdo something. So I don't always work hard. I often try and find out the easiest way of doing something.
Right.
But I guess I'm just trying to be a person in the world, aware of my actions. I try to make a contribution by making things which get people to think about the world in a different way. Sometimes by taking a picture, sometimes by by building something, lots of different ways. Um, and I share these things in a myriad of ways:
Yeah.
websites, books, conversations like this. Um, and it connects with design, it connects with art, it connects with comedy, it connects with
Yeah.
sometimes music or sound, it connects with lots of different things. Sometimes the work looks as though it might have been made by a child. Sometimes you're not sure whether it's been made at all or whether it's just chance,
Yeah.
or found. So I'm not trying to be anything other than really what I am.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that was a great answer. I feel like that. Um, I talked to Peter Mendelsohn recently, the book cover designer, and he used a phrase that has stuck with me, and I feel like it's kind of what you were just talking about, that he got from a book called Department of Speculation, and the term is art monster, where you're just not. You're not defining yourself by titles or mediums or processes. You just kind of have this compulsion to put things out into the world that weren't there before. And I feel like that actually is a kind of perfect description for what you were just talking about and kind of your way of living and working. I have just a couple. Oh, go ahead.
The monster bit sounds a bit scary to me.
Yeah, maybe it comes back. It comes back to that aggression you're talking about.
Kind of, yeah.
In your work. I have just a couple more quick questions to kind of wrap it up. This has been so interesting to me. I'm curious. You had started talking about the things that are kind of on your mind now and the things you're thinking about. Now that I'm thinking about this, you also said you were trying to be more present. So this might not be a good question to ask, but I'm kind of curious about what's next for you, or what are the things that are, what are the things that you haven't done, or mediums you haven't worked in, or things that you're thinking about that you want to explore more right now?
Yeah, I'm doing one day at a time. Really, that's so going back to what we've already described. So I'm trying not to.
How do you do that? What's that actually look like?
I remind myself quite often during the day to I have like certain things, like routine things, like brushing my teeth, or open every time I open a door, and I've got maybe like a dozen of these small things where they trigger. It's like a moment for me just to concentrate on only that act. And it's incredibly difficult. If you're because cleaning your teeth takes about 3 minutes, and just if you only think about cleaning your teeth whilst cleaning your teeth, your mind is constantly kind of thinking about the next thing, the next thing. So then just keep bringing it back. So it's kind of a meditative practice of just focus on the breath. It's the same thing, and I'm trying to do that with work. So when I begin work, or thinking about something, then you jump to the next thing or to the next thing, and it's kind of just accepting that the mind races ahead, but just letting it do that, but being present. So letting those things exist, and but just not getting distracted by them. Just staying in the moment to do the thing that you set out to do.
I love that.
That's what I'm trying to do.
That's so interesting. I mean, I'm just thinking about how often my mind wanders from what I'm doing, and so something as simple as opening a door and focusing on that, it sounds so simple. But it also sounds really hard.
Yeah.
I'm curious if there are books or writers or artists or designers who have kind of really influenced you, or have kind of shaped the way you think, what design or not design, art or not art, just kind of people who have kind of really shaped how you think about all of this stuff that we've talked about.
There's a long list, and I could just like recite like a list of names. It feels a bit odd just to do that, but I guess a lot of the people that I find most inspiring are friends. So I've become friends with them. So I guess going back, if I go back, just so I don't miss anybody, I'm sure I miss somebody else.
Yeah, of course.
But at college, like a really important teacher was Rupert Bassett, and I think he'd be a brilliant person to interview.
Oh, okay.
And Jeff White, and then at the RCA, there was John Wozencroft and Rick Poyner.
Oh, yeah.
And then at the Walker Arts Centre was Andrew Blauvelt.
Right.
And Andrew was a huge, and still is like a brilliant
Yeah.
But the impact that he's had on my life is immense. Like at the time when I was graduating from the RCA, I started to work with him at the Walker Arts Centre.
Right.
And that was a really, I don't know, looking back, it was, there are key stages in your development. And I feel so, I had all these things that I was exploring at college, but it was all college work.
Right.
And somehow at the Walker, it kind of it became real. And Andrew just gave me the permission to do that somehow. And,
oh, that's nice.
And I feel a lot of kind of gratitude, and I think he's just a brilliant man. And then studying, I was really lucky both in my degree and MA to have people that I was studying with that are also great people and designers. So there's a big list.
Yeah.
And with books, it's the same. And the book that we mentioned at the beginning, The 6 Years, I guess that's probably the most important book I've ever read. But then, like, I'm inspired by Yoko Ono, Lawrence Weiner, and then other designers like Ken Garland. Damn, there's so many people.
I think that was a great answer, and we brought it back to the beginning with the book that kind of set you on this journey. Anyway, Daniel, this was so interesting to me. Like I said at the beginning, I'm a big fan. I think the work that you're doing is kind of endlessly interesting to me, and something that I feel like I've gotten a lot out of. And so it was nice to kind of talk to you about how you think about all of these things, because I've been admiring you from afar. So thank you so much for doing this. This was a blast.
Great. Well, thanks very much for the invitation.
This episode was recorded on July 26, 2018. Our theme music is by Andy Borgasani. We're on Twitter and Instagram at Surface Podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, SoundCloud, and at scratchingthesurface.fm. Thanks for listening.